Hello, everyone. I'm Dane.
And I'm Kamraun. Welcome to the Malazan Brotherhood podcast, home of the most professional digressors.
Today we will be discussing Book 1, Chapter 3 of House of Chains, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is part 4 of our coverage of this chapter.
This podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it is most definitely not a replacement to reading the books.
We will be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will probably not be spoilers, because integrity, but we will try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the books.
Today's episode contains extreme violence and scenes of eldritch horror, and thus is not suitable for children.
Our show is listener-supported. If you would like to support us, we would really appreciate that. You can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com. Currently, we are posting ad-free episodes on Patreon weekly.
Also, we'd really like to hear from you. Send any feedback or comments to contact@horsefrogproductions.com. All right, Chapter 3, Part 4. Quick reminder of where we're picking up the chapter. Torvald and Karsa are in this dory, and they are being approached by this massive three-masted ship with some unknown warriors on the deck,
peering down upon them.
The dory thumped as it made contact with the hull on the port side, just beyond the prow. A rope ladder snaked down, but Karsa, his sword slung over his shoulder, was already climbing up the hull, there being no shortage of handholds. He reached the forecastle rail and swung himself up and over it. His feet found the deck, and he straightened. A ring of gray-skinned warriors faced him, taller than lowlanders, but still a head shorter than the Teblor. Curved sabers were scabbarded to their hips, and much of their clothing was made from some kind of hide, short-haired, dark and glistening. Their long brown hair was intricately braided, hanging down to frame angular, multi-hued eyes. Behind them, down amidships, there was a pile of severed heads, a few lowlander, but most similar in features to the gray-skinned warriors, though with skins of black.
Alarm bells are going off here.
Now, just because there's a pile of heads in the middle of the ship's deck doesn't mean it's a certain ship that we've seen before in Deadhouse Gates.
Okay.
Let's keep reading and see what other details emerge here.
Yeah,
Let's not jump to conclusions, okay? You had to jump to conclusions, Matt. You just jumped right to it. Ice rippled up Karsa's spine as he saw countless eyes among those severed heads shift towards him. Okay, it's the Salonda. The one sentence is all it took. How cool is this, though? I love it when different storylines converge.
Yeah. This is a big one, too. This is one of those, there's no subtlety about it. Do I remember that correctly? Like, this one really stands up and kind of slaps you across the face. I like it.
The Salonda was already so horrific the first time we saw it. So to come back here, We'll talk a little bit more, I'm sure, as we get through the details here. But to see what's going on, presumably at some point prior to what we saw before, is pretty neat.
Yeah.
One of the gray-skinned warriors snapped something, his expression as contemptuous as his tone. Behind Karsa, Torvald reached the railing. The speaker seemed to be waiting for some sort of response. As the silence stretched, the faces on either side twisted into sneers. The spokesman barked out a command, pointed to the deck. Torvald said, he wants us to kneel, Karsa. I think maybe we should, Karsa growled. I would not kneel when chained. Why would I do so now? Torvald said, because I count 16 of them, and who knows how many more are below, and they're getting angrier. Karsa cut in, 16 or 60, they know nothing of fighting Teblor. Torvald said, how can you? Karsa saw two warriors shift gauntleted hands towards sword grips. The blood sword flashed out, cut a sweeping horizontal slash across the entire half-circle of gray-skinned warriors. Blood sprayed, bodies reeled, sprawled backwards, tumbling over the low railing and down to the mid-deck.
You had spoke of agency before. Is this what you were thinking?
Well, I guess things haven't changed much. To be fair, these peoples are being super hostile to Karsa, and their moves were threatening.
Just merely reaching towards a sword is enough to get a beheading?
What about the sneering, the contemptuous tone? I'm not getting a good impression from these people yet.
You know how when they talk about certain cultures and their behaviors and not everything lines up with your Western beliefs, I've heard in some cultures showing your teeth could be a sign of aggression, whereas you and I would think that that's smiling. So maybe this is the inverse of that, and them pointing to the deck and reaching for a sword is actually a gesture of goodwill.
Plausible. I guess we'll never know.
Well, certainly not now.
Karsa jumped the gun.
Just to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe he was going to get a cup of porridge or something. You're right. He shit the bed, as they say.
True. All he had to do was kneel.
Yeah. So simple.
It's probably pretty universal that when you're kneeling, you're subjugating yourself before somebody. Would you agree with that?
I mean, you're forcing me to go back on my entire previous argument of playing devil's advocate.
Well, I'm just asking a question.
Historically, yes. I would say yes.
Okay.
Unless you're like getting down to do laundry or something, you just need to take a knee.
Do you think the sneering and the reaching for the scabbarded weapon, putting your hand on the weapon, about to draw the weapon, how is that viewed?
Well,
as a positive thing? Maybe they're going to just salute him?
a sneer could be, mistaken. Maybe some people have an ugly smile and they don't really know how to do a nice looking smile.
True. I mean, sometimes you might be working across a car shop from somebody and you look over and you catch their eyes and one's sneering. Maybe he's not in a bad mood. Maybe he's just sneering because...
If you were trying to smile at me and if you had a scabbard on your hip, you probably would have gone for that day. That's what I believe. You were in a foul mood.
The forecastle was clear apart from Karsa and, a pace behind him, Torvald Nam. The 7 warriors who had been on the middeck drew back as one. Then, unsheathing their weapons, they edged forward. Karsa answered the Daru's question. They were within my reach. That is how I know they know nothing of fighting at Teblor. Now, witness while I take this ship. With a bellow, he leapt down into the midst of the enemy.
So yeah, no indication of wanting to parlay from Karsa at all.
I think he's read the room enough to know that they aren't talking their way out of this. Do you think he's overreacting? Like, really?
I mean, Karsa doesn't know anything but an overreaction. But, I mean, you're right. He read the room appropriately. Mm-hmm. I don't think that there was any, you mind just giving us a little food and water and we'll be on our way? That's probably not going down.
I guess that's the challenge, isn't it? Knowing when you must act decisively and some things just can't stand, and then just letting things slide further and further into what is acceptable, just a little piece at a time. Some lines have to be hard lines. Otherwise, you just constantly get eroded into another scenario where somebody just wears you down over time with just little concessions. And then eventually you're so far away from where you started.
Excellent point.
Karsa's got a hard line. He's not going to kneel for anybody.
Yeah, he's not getting pushed back.
The gray-skinned warriors were not lacking in skill, yet it availed them not. Karsa had known the loss of freedom. He would not accept such again. The demand to kneel before these scrawny, sickly creatures had triggered in him seething fury.
So I guess we kind of touched on this already, but in the last episode we were commenting how it looked like Karsa's humbling was starting a little bit. Doesn't really look like that here, does it?
I mean, they're asking him to kneel. He literally just got out of months of being in chains. He has no idea if they're just going to try to chain him up again. Would you be okay with that?
I mean, I suppose that there's a time and place, right? Maybe there are times for a little bit of being humble and other times where this is the appropriate reaction.
I think so.
Okay.
I guess part of the problem is they can't talk to each other.
Well, I was curious about that too, because Torvald, he knew precisely he wants us to kneel. Maybe he just understood the gesture a little bit better?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I wasn't sure if this was... No, this would not be like a Sunna dialect, of course. All right.
6 of the 7 warriors were down. The last one, shouting, had turned about and was running towards the doorway at the other end of the mid-deck. He paused long enough to drag a massive harpoon from a nearby rack, spinning and flinging it at Karsa. The Teblor caught it in his left hand. He closed on the fleeing man, cutting him down at the doorway's threshold. Ducking and reversing the weapons in his hands, the harpoon now in his right and the bloodsword in his left, he plunged into the gloom of the passage beyond the doorway. 2 steps down, into a wide galley with a wooden table in its center. A second doorway at the opposite end. A narrow passage beyond, lined by berths. Then an ornate door that squealed as Karsa shoved it aside. 4 attackers, a fury of blows exchanged. Karsa blocking with the harpoon and counterattacking with the bloodsword. In moments, 4 broken bodies dying on the cabin's gleaming wood floor. A 5th figure seated in a chair on the other side of the room, hands raised, sorcery swirling into the air. With a snarl, Karsa surged forward. The magic flashed, sputtered, then the harpoon's point punched into the figure's chest, tore through and drove it into the chair's wood backing. A look of disbelief frozen on the gray face, eyes locking with Karsa's own one last time, before all life left them. Karsa bellowed, "Uragal! Witness a Teblor's rage.
When I read this first time, that's all I could think. All this time, being imprisoned didn't have any lasting effects on his martial prowess. Even though I know while they were rowing and he's thinking about his strength returning, this is still very impressive.
I think the speed is really what surprises me. It's truly impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, you feel like you'd get out of practice, especially after months and months of laying there and not being able to do anything. And then all he's been doing is rowing, and his strength came back, and he's able to take on 16 of these guys, 17, 18, however many it is now, without any issues. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Are you getting any feelings while this fight scene is going on in this cabin that you're in a pirate ship in Stranglethorn Vale and you've worked your way to the captain's cabin and you're fighting in close quarters? Are you getting that vibe at all?
I did not,
like
actually.
A World of Warcraft feeling?
I can totally see it at this point, but that did not cross my mind now.
I don't think that image has generally come to me when reading this, but now as I'm reading through the actual battle scene, I'm just getting this claustrophobic fight in there where you're surrounded aggroing enemies from the other parts of the ship and you're stuck in the captain's cabin.
I wonder if that reference doesn't sit with me, because every time I have done what you're talking about, that particular quest
Here we go.
in World of Warcraft, it doesn't go as smoothly. I generally get overrun all the time, and then it's like you're squeaking out by the skin of your teeth. It has not gone as swimmingly as it has for Karsa here.
And it's not just Stranglethorn Vale. I mean, there was some other pirate ships on Kalimdor, I think, in the Barrens. Remember, early leveling in the Barrens, there were some pirate ships docked there over by Gadgetzan.
Or on the way to Gadgetzan?
No, like south on the coast.
Oh.
You'd be fighting your way to get to the ship, and then the respawns, you have to beat the respawns, and then like sometimes somebody would have been there earlier than you. You're like, oh yeah, I can get up there. And then like all of a sudden they all start spawning on top of you, and then you're overrun.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a tough scenario.
Oh yeah.
Silence following his ringing words. Then the slow pad of blood dripping from the sorcerer's chair onto the rug. Something cold rippled through Karsa, the breath of someone unknown, nameless, but filled with rage. Growling, he shrugged it off, then looked around. High-ceilinged for lowlanders, the ship's cabin was all of the same black wood. Oil lanterns glimmered from sconces on the walls. On the table were maps and charts, the drawings on them illegible as far as the Teblor was concerned. A sound from the doorway. Karsa turned. Torvald Nom stepped within, scanning the sprawled corpses, then fixing his gaze on the seated figure with the spear still impaling it. I thought this would be a good point to go back and reread the section from Deadhouse Gates where they entered this room in the Solanda so that we can remind ourselves of what it looked like to them at that point in time.
This is like a Scooby-Doo. Diddly-doo, diddly-doo, diddly-doo. You've got the...
I do have to say that I am taking this as an opportunity to go back to my favorite book, Deadhouse Gates, just for a little while. So indulge me, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Culp strode toward the cabin hatch. Gessler sheathed his sword and then followed. The hatch descended 2 steps, then opened out into a galley. A large wooden table commanded the center. Opposite them was a second hatch, leading to a narrow walkway with berths on either side. At the far end was the door to the captain's cabin. No one occupied the berths, but there was gear aplenty, all waiting for owners who no longer needed it. The cabin door opened with a loud squeal. Even with all they had seen thus far, the interior was a scene of horror. 4 bodies were immediately visible, 3 of them twisted grotesquely in postures of sudden death. There was no evidence of decay, but no blood was visible. Whatever had killed them had crushed them thoroughly without once breaking skin. The exception sat in the captain's chair at the end of a map table, as if presiding over Hood's own stage. A spear jutted from his chest, and had been pushed through to the chair, then beyond. Blood glistened down the front of the figure's body, pooled in his lap. It had stopped flowing, yet looked still wet. Gessler whispered a question. Tist Andy? I need to pause for a second. Recently, there was a interview that I listened to with Mr. Erikson, and I've been saying Tist Andy or Tist Edur, and he says it Tist. So I'm going to have to reprogram myself for appropriate pronunciation here. And sorry for getting that wrong for multiple years of covering this at this point.
I'm going to have to do the same thing. I'm in the exact same boat. It's just how I've been saying it incorrectly.
Culp softly said, They have that look, but not quite. Their skins are gray, not black. Nor do they look very refined. Gessler said, the Taistandi of Drifta Valley were said to be pretty barbaric. Not that anyone living has visited the isle. Culp said none returned in any case. But these are wearing skins, barely cured. And look at their jewelry. The 4 bodies were adorned in bone fetishes, claws, the canines of beasts, and polished seashells. There was none of the fine Taistandi craftwork that Culp had seen in the past. Moreover, all 4 were brown-haired, the hair hanging loose and uncombed, stringy with grease. The Taistandi hair was either silver, white, or midnight black. Gessler asked, what in Hood's name are we seeing? Culp said, the killers of the Quan sailors and the Taistandi is my guess. They then sailed into this warren, maybe by choice, maybe not, and ran into something nastier than them. Gessler asked, you think the rest of the crew escaped? Culp shrugged and said, if you've got the sorcery to command headless corpses, who needs a bigger crew than the one we're looking at right here? Gessler said, they still look like Taistandi, as he peered closely at the man in the chair. Culp said, we should get Heberick in here. Maybe he's read something somewhere that'll bring light to all this. Gessler said, wait here. Culp listened to Gessler's footsteps recede up the walkway, then leaned both hands on the table and scanned the charts on its surface. There was a map there, showing a land he could not recognize. A ragged coastline of fjords studded with cursory sketches of pine trees. Inland was a faint whitewash, as of ice or snow. A course had been plotted, striking east from the jagged shoreline, then southward across a vast ocean. The Malazan Empire purported to have world maps, but they showed nothing like the land he saw here. The Empire's claim to dominance suddenly seemed pathetic. Heberick stepped into the cabin behind him. Culp did not turn from his study of the chart. He said, give them a closer look. Heberick moved past Culp and crouched down to frown at the captain's face. The high cheekbones and angular eye sockets looked Taistandi, as did the man's evident height. Heberick reached out tentatively. Culp growled, wait, be careful what you touch, and which arm you use. Heberick hissed in exasperation and dropped his arm. After a moment he straightened and said, I can only think of one thing, Taist-Edur. Culp asked, who? Heberick said, Gothos Folly. There's mention of 3 Taist peoples arriving from another realm. Of course the only one that's known to us is the Taist-Andi, and Gothos only names one of the other groups, Taist-Edur. Gray-skinned, not black. Children of the unwelcome union of Mother Dark with the Light. Culp asked, unwelcome? Heberick grimaced and said, the Taist-Andi considered it a degradation of pure dark, and the source of all their subsequent ills. Anyway, Gothos Folly is the only tome where you'll find mention of them. It also happens to be the oldest. Culp asked, Gothos was Jagut, correct? Heberick said, aye, and as sour-tempered a writer as I've ever had the displeasure of reading. Tell me, Culp, what does your warren reveal? Culp said, nothing. Heberick glanced over in surprise and asked, nothing at all? Culp said, no. Heberick said, but they look to be in stasis. This blood's still wet. Culp replied, I know. Heberick gestured at something around the captain's neck and said, there's your whistle, assuming we're going to make use of what's below decks. And just a quick reminder, the bodies of the severed heads are manning the oars below decks. Culp said, either that or we sit here and starve, and stepped closer to the captain's corpse. A long bone whistle hung from a leather thong, resting alongside the spear's shaft. He continued, I sense nothing from that bone tube either. It may not even work. Heberick shrugged and said, I'm going back up for what passes for fresh air. That spear's bargast, by the way. Culp countered, it's too damned big. Heberick said, I know, but that's what it looks like to me. Again, Culp said, it's too big. Heberick made no reply and disappeared up the walkway. Culp glared at the spear and thought, it's too big. After a moment, he reached out and gingerly removed the whistle from around the corpse's neck. Back to present.
Yeah.
So, confirmation that these gray-skinned individuals that Karsa just killed are Taist-Edur. We also got additional information about them in Memories of Ice, namely that the Barghast were fighting them while sailing to Genabakis on their ships.
Okay, nice. Starting to tie some of these details together. A lot of fun. I like this.
Torvald said, you needn't worry about the oarsmen. Karsa said, are they slaves? Then we shall free them. Torvald shrugged and said, slaves? I don't think so. They wear no chains, Karsa. Mind you, they have no heads either. As I said, I don't think we have to concern ourselves with them. He strode forward to examine the maps on the table. Torvald said, something tells me these hapless bastards you just killed were as lost as us. Karsa said, they were the victors in the battle of the ships. Torvald said, little good it did them. Karsa shook the blood from his sword, drew a deep breath, and said, I kneel to no one. Torvald said, I could have knelt twice, and that might have satisfied them. Now we're as ignorant as we were before seeing this ship, nor can the two of us manage a craft of this size. Karsa asserted, they would have done to us as was done to the oarsmen.
I suppose.
Okay. I mean, a safe assumption.
It is an assumption, and you know what they say about assumptions, but could be.
Okay. Torvald said, possibly. He swung his attention on one of the corpses at his feet, slowly crouched, and said, barbaric looking, these ones. By Daru standards, that is. Sealskin, true seafarers then, and strung claws and teeth in shells. The one in the captain's chair was a mage? Karsa said, yes. I do not understand such warriors. Why not use swords or spears? Their magic is pitiful, yet they seem so sure of it. And look at his expression. Torvald murmured, surprised, yes. He glanced back at Karsa, then said, they're confident because sorcery usually works. Most attackers don't survive getting hit by magic. It rips them apart. Karsa made his way back to the doorway. After a moment, Torvald followed. They returned to the mizzen deck. Karsa began stripping the corpses lying about, severing ears and tongues before tossing the naked bodies overboard. Torvald watched for a time. Then he moved to the decapitated heads and said, they've been following everything you do, with their eyes. It's too much to bear. He removed the hide wrapping of a nearby bundle and folded it around the nearest severed head, then tied it tight. He added, darkness would better suit them, all things considered. Karsa frowned and asked, why do you say that, Torvald Nam? Which would you prefer, the ability to see things around you, or darkness? Torvald said, these are Taistandi, apart from a few, and those few look far too much like me. Karsa asked, who are these Taistandi? Torvald said, just a people. There are some fighting in Caladan Brood's liberation army on Genebakis. An ancient people, it said. In any case, they worship darkness.
Torvald always impresses with how well informed he is. He always seems to have information, or at least not the full picture, but pieces enough to where he can kind of paint the picture.
He seems pretty well read, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's had some good schooling due to being from one of the founding families of Darujistan.
That's a good point. That could be, even though he's now a bandit named Knuckles. But yeah, maybe before all that started, he did have, a little bit of schooling.
Some better opportunities for education.
Yeah, right.
Karsa, suddenly weary, sat down on the steps leading to the forecastle and muttered, darkness, a place where one is left blind. A strange thing to worship. Torvald replied, perhaps the most realistic worship of all, as he wrapped another severed head. Torvald went on, how many of us bow before a god in the desperate hope that we can somehow shape our fate? Praying to that familiar face pushes away our terror of the unknown being the future. Who knows, maybe these Taistandi are the only ones among us who see the truth being oblivion. Keeping his eyes averted, he carefully gathered another black-skinned, long-haired head and said, it's a good thing these poor souls have no throats left to utter sounds, else we would find ourselves in a ghastly debate. Karsa said, you doubt your own words, then. Torvald said, always, Karsa. On a more mundane level, words are like gods, a means of keeping the terror at bay. I will likely have nightmares about this until my aged heart finally gives out. An endless succession of heads, with all too cognizant eyes, to wrap up in sealskin. And with each one I tie up, pop, another appears.
Torvald almost sounds like he's taking the place of Bairoth in this partnership, kind of playing the role of doubt and caution similar to how Bairoth would. However, Karsa seems to tolerate him far better than he did Bairoth.
Maybe Karsa feels a certain bond with Torvald since Torvald was truly loyal to him during his imprisonment.
That's also a good point. He was more loyal. I guess maybe doubt and challenging is a little bit different because Bairoth, there seemed to be kind of an undercurrent of a challenge, and maybe that's more in line with what would kind of set Karsa off.
Another distinction could be, do you remember when they were about to leave the slave pits and Torvald just kind of casually threw out, lead me, war leader?
Yeah.
And Karsa said, am I your war leader? And then the other Teblor were like, hold on before you say anything. Maybe that is also a distinction where if Karsa was the designated war leader, you're not allowed to question. Whereas Torvald is actually a companion and he's not technically following Karsa. They're going through this together.
That's interesting. Yeah, that could be a clear distinction, something that Karsa has filed away that precise kind of phrase.
That's the line, right?
Yeah, that very well could be. You're right.
I need to be careful about using war leader around you then.
Yeah, you may. You may need to be careful. That might explain a little bit of hostility, from time to time.
Turn you into a tyrant. Karsa said, "Your words are not but foolishness." Torvald said, "Oh, and how many souls have you delivered unto darkness, Karsa Orlong?" The Teblor's eyes narrowed. Then he quietly said, "I do not think it was darkness that they found." After a moment he looked away, struck silent by a sudden realization. A year ago he would have killed someone for saying what Torvald had just said, had he understood its intent to wound, which in itself was unlikely. A year ago, words had been blunt, awkward things, confined within a simple, if slightly mysterious world. But that flaw had been Karsa's alone, not a characteristic of the Teblor in general, for Bairoth Guild had flung many edged words at Karsa, a constant source of amusement for the clever warrior, though probably dulled by Karsa's own unawareness of their intent. Pause. There is definitely a component of, if you're throwing underhanded comments at somebody and it's not getting them riled up, it's just not as fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have to get that reaction.
They're not taking the bait.
Yep. I see this a lot, interactions that I have. My wife has had similar interactions from work, and she's easy to take the bait, I guess. Somebody else is winding her up, and then she gets upset by it. She bites, and try and tell her all the time, I think your best response is just silence. You can give them a cold stare, but don't answer. And then it becomes less fun for them to keep saying the same thing over and over. So yeah, the reaction is what those people are looking for, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Torvald Nam's endless words, but no, more than just that. All that Karsa had experienced since leaving his village had served as instruction on the complexity of the world. Subtlety had been a venomed serpent slithering unseen through his life. Its fangs had sunk deep many times, yet not once had he become aware of their origin. Not once had he even understood the source of the pain. The poison itself had coursed deep within him, and the only answer he gave, when he gave one at all, was of violence, often misdirected, a lashing out on all sides.
Karsa's mental state here is a little bit of a seesaw. As he says, in times before he would have killed somebody for less. He wanted to go to blows with Bairoth when they reached that cave with the glyphs, and all they were doing was just talking about what it meant. Then he gets taken prisoner, and the humbling seems to start. He gets free, slaughters these Taistadur, is filled with rage again. Now he's reflective again, and it looks like this is hitting him in a way that maybe he's questioning what his gods, what that worship means, as well as what he says right there, the complexity of the world.
What did Bairoth say? Something along the lines of, "One day I hope you know uncertainty." And we are seeing its effect on Karsa now. He's actually evaluating things before simply reacting with violence. I think this is a change in a positive direction, where he's actually thinking of things. You don't have to necessarily react with violence to certain things. Not everything has to be a duel to the death at a slight or something,
True. If we do think back to those conversations and Bairoth says something, I think, again, in the cave section with the glyphs, he realizes his hand is already on the hilt of his sword. Subconsciously, that's already there, and he's thinking, we're going to battle.
Bairoth was laying down, and Karsa's like, "Get up. We're going to fight right now." And Bairoth's like, "No, I'm not going to do that."
Yeah. The straw's on my back.
Yeah, the straw's on my back. Karsa thought, darkness and living blind. Then returned his gaze to the Daru kneeling and wrapping severed heads, there on the mizzen deck. He thought, and who has dragged the cloth from my eyes? Who has awakened Karsa Orlong, son of Sinnig? Uragul? No, not Uragul. Karsa knew that for certain. For the otherworldly rage he had felt in the cabin, that icy breath that had swept through him, that had belonged to his god. A fierce displeasure to which Karsa had found himself oddly indifferent. The seven faces in the rock never spoke of freedom. The Teblor were their servants, their slaves. What was Uragul displeased with in that captain's cabin where Karsa took out those Taistadur? Doesn't he want violence? I thought that was a strange reaction.
I agree. That little segment kind of had me questioning what exactly he felt, and his reaction of being indifferent to the rage. I don't know, that was a little confusing to me.
I think we can come back to this in a little bit here.
Okay.
It is cleared up partially, but at the time, as I read through that, the first thought I had was sorcery was just cast upon Karsa. So whatever god was the source of that sorcery, maybe they were frustrated that Karsa could just shrug it off so easily. That was my initial thought, but then I think we get the context later of he knows it's Uragul. So why is Urgal pissed off that he killed these Taistadur? What connection is there? I guess that becomes the question.
Okay.
Torvald approached and said, "You look unwell, Karsa. I am sorry for my last words." Karsa rose and said, "There is no need, Torvald Nam. We should return to our..." He stopped as the first splashes of rain struck him, then the deck on all sides. Milky, slimy rain. Torvald grunted and said, "Ugh! If this is a god's spit, he's decidedly unwell." The water smelled foul, rotten. It quickly coated the ship decks, the rigging and tattered sails overhead in a thick, pale grease. I was thinking, brother, ew. What is this, brother? That's nasty, man.
I thought the same thing, though. I mean, a thick, pale grease, all this foul-smelling water. I guess it's the same thing, rainwater pulling stuff out from the environment and then raining down. If this whole area has kind of a funky smell to it, I guess it makes sense.
Part of me thought this water is so nasty,
right,
with all this silt and everything, and so maybe as that's evaporating, some of it's going up with it, but I don't know how feasible that is because, when it evaporates, it kind of gets cleansed a little bit. I don't know.
That is the thought that came to my head initially, though, that kind of the silt and everything that's in the water, rotting vegetation and corpses and whatever else.
Swearing, the Daru began gathering foodstuffs and water casks to load into their dory below. Karsa completed one last circuit of the decks, examining the weapons and armor he had pulled from the gray-skinned bodies. He found the rack of harpoons and gathered the 6 that remained. The downpour thickened, creating murky, impenetrable walls on all sides of the ship. Slipping in the deepening muck, Karsa and Torvald quickly resupplied the dory, then pushed out from the ship's hull, the Teblor at the oars. Within moments, the ship was lost from sight, and around them the rain slackened. 5 sweeps of the oars and they were out from beneath it entirely, once again on gently heaving seas under pallid sky. The strange coastline was visible ahead, slowly drawing closer.
So that was some very strange, very localized rain.
You have a theory about this rain?
I guess we'll get right into it, won't we?
Yeah. On the forecastle of the massive ship, moments after the dory with its 2 passengers slipped behind the screen of muddy rain, 7 almost insubstantial figures rose from the slime. Shattered bones, gaping wounds bleeding nothing, the figures weaved uncertainly in the gloom, as if barely able to maintain their grip on the scene they had entered. One of them hissed with anger and said, "Each time we seek to draw the knot tight." Another finished in a wry, bitter tone, "He cuts it." A third one stepped down to the mizzen deck, kicked desultorily at a discarded sword. In a rasping voice, the third voice said, "The failure belonged to the Taistadur. If punishment must be enacted, it should be in answer to their arrogance." The first speaker snapped, "Not for us to demand. We are not the masters in this scheme." Another one said, "Nor the Taistadur." The first one said, "Even so, and we are each given particular tasks. Karsa Orlong survives still, and he must be our only concern." Another said, "He begins to know doubts." The first one said, "Nonetheless, his journey continues. It falls to us now, with what little power we are able to extend, to direct his path onward." The third said, "We've had scant success thus far." The first one said, "Untrue. The shattered warren stirs awake once more. The broken heart of the First Empire begins to bleed, less than a trickle at the moment, but soon it will become a flood. We need only set our chosen warrior upon the proper current." This last little statement by the first voice, where he's talking about the heart of the First Empire bleeding and there coming a flood of that in the future, there being a chosen warrior, this is not going to make sense for some time. So just keep that in mind. Maybe we'll come back to it in a couple years.
A couple years, yeah.
Yeah, a couple years. We did it with the boat. I actually had a note. We need to come back to this when we get to the Solanda with Karsa from my notes in Deadhouse Gates.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting that we actually did that. So I'll try to remember to come back to this. I think you're keeping a running list of things we need to come back to, right?
I am trying to, yeah. But you're right.
Yeah.
Stick with us for a couple of years.
Another voice said, "And is that within our power, limited as it still remains?" This is in regards to the statement of them only needing to set their chosen warrior upon the proper current. The first voice said, "Let us find out. Begin the preparations. Barak, scatter that handful of odotaral dust in the cabin. The Teist Edur sorcerer's warren remains open, and in this place it will quickly become a wound, a growing wound. The time has not yet come for such unveilings." The speaker then lifted its mangled head and seemed to sniff the air. After a moment, it announced, "We must work quickly. I believe we are being hunted." The remaining 6 turned to face the speaker, who nodded in answer to their silent question and said, "Yes, there are kin upon our trail."
So some of the things we touched on in the first chapter seem to be coming back into focus here. The 7 having ulterior motives, and they may not be as benevolent as the Teblor may believe. And they seem to be working with some other unknown entities.
And, to further add, seem to be working in concert with the Teist Edur to capture Karsa for some purpose.
This is that 4D chess or whatever.
Yeah, somebody's playing 4D chess.
Yeah. Also, going back to that bit from Deadhouse, when Heberick asks Culp, "What does your warn reveal?" and he says nothing, I guess that sort of answers that question, that one of these 7 had sprinkled Odotarl dust around, and so, I'm guessing, deadening the effects that could be detected by somebody else.
That is a great catch. Really, really good.
Okay.
The Talani Mass that showed up in Deadhouse Gates, I believe those are the ones hunting these renegades down.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
This also serves as confirmation that the 7 are Talani Mass. Mm. And now we have more context around their bones being shattered and buried due to their failure. They must have been pretty bad to deserve that level of punishment.
That's a good point. I wonder what they could have done. For the most part, I guess from what we've seen so far anyway, the Talani Mass are relatively cohesive, even though they're from different clans and stuff. Most of them took the vow, with the exception of Kalava, maybe some others that didn't take the vow. But yeah, these guys are definitely outsiders to the rest, I get the feeling.
I got the impression that the Soul Taken among them, she had done some pretty bad stuff. And like gotten out of control. And maybe there's a component of the Soul Taken madness there where she got bloodlusted or something and was doing things that the Talani Mass thought were out of the realm of what's acceptable. I know that's rich coming from a peoples that are committing genocide against the Jagut. But,
yeah.
I mean, apparently there was a line there that was crossed.
All right.
The wreckage of an entire land had drawn up alongside the massive stone wall. Uprooted trees, rough-hewn logs, planks, shingles, and pieces of wagons and carts were visible amidst the detritus. The verges were thick with matted grasses and rotted leaves, forming a broad plain that twisted, rose, and fell on the waves. The wall was barely visible in places, so high was the flotsam and the level of the water beneath it. Torvald Nam was positioned at the bow whilst Karsa rowed. Torvald said, "I don't know how we'll get to that wall. You better back the oars now, friend, lest we ground ourselves on that mess. There's catfish about." Karsa slowed the dory. They drifted, the hull nudging the carpet of flotsam. After a few moments, it became apparent that there was a current pulling their craft along the edge. Torvald muttered, "Well, that's a first for this sea. Do you think this is some sort of tide?" Karsa said no, his gaze tracking the strange shoreline in the direction of the current. He added, "It is a breach in the wall." Torvald said, "Oh, can you see where?" Karsa said, "Yes, I think so." The current was tugging them along faster now. Karsa continued, "There is an indentation in the shoreline, and many trees and logs jammed where the wall should be. Can you not hear the roar?" Tension rode Torvald's words as he said, "Aye, now I can." He straightened at the bow, then said, "I see it, Karsa. We'd better—" Karsa cut in, "Yes, it is best we avoid this." The Teblor repositioned himself at the oars. He drew the dory away from the verge. The hull tugged sluggishly beneath them, began twisting. Karsa leaned his weight into each sweep, struggling to regain control. The water swirled around them. Torvald shouted, "Karsa, there's people, near the breach. I see a wrecked boat." The breach was on the Teblor's left as he pulled the dory across the current. He looked to where Torvald was pointing, and after a moment he bared his teeth and said, "The slave master and his men." Torvald said, "They're waving us over."
So these slippery Nathi aren't dead after all.
Well. Let's see what happens here. Karsa ceased sweeping with his left oar, swinging the craft around, then said, "We cannot defeat this current. The further out we proceed, the stronger it becomes." Torvald said, "I think that's what happened to Silgar's boat. They managed to ground it just this side of the mouth, stoving it in the process. We should try to avoid a similar fate, Karsa, if we can, that is." Karsa said, "Then keep an eye out for submerged logs." He angled the dory closer to shore, then asked, "Also, are the lowlanders armed?" After a moment, Torvald said, "Not sure that I can see. They look to be in a pretty bad condition. They're perched on a small island of logs. Silgar and Damask and one other. Borug, I think. Gods, Karsa, they're starved. Karsa growled, take a harpoon. That hunger could well drive them to desperation. Torvald said, a touch shoreward, Karsa. We're almost there. There was a soft crunch from the hull, then a grinding, stuttering motion as the current sought to drag them along the verge. Torvald clambered out, ropes in one hand and harpoon in the other. Beyond him, Karsa saw, as he turned about, huddled the 3 Nathi lowlanders, making no move to help and, if anything, drawing back as far as they could manage on the tangled island. The breach's roar was a still distant thundering, though closer at hand were ominous cracks, tearing and shifting noises. The logjam was coming loose. Torvald made fast the dory with a skein of lines tied to various branches and roots. Karsa stepped ashore, drawing his bloodsword, his eyes leveling on Silgar. The slave master attempted to retreat further. Near the 3 emaciated lowlanders lay the remains of a 4th, his bones picked clean.
I guess this goes back to what you'd mentioned before about what would you eat in desperation.
Yeah, I know we all are disgusted by this innately, but no one knows what they would do until they are starving like that, I think.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, the timeline seems to track, right? They must not have encountered the ships, and thus been able to resupply the way Karsa and Torvald were. So they're left with cannibalism as their last option.
Silgar implored, Teblor, you must listen to me. Karsa slowly advanced. Silgar shouted, I can save us. Torvald tugged at Karsa's arm and said, wait, friend, let's hear the bastard. Karsa growled, he will say anything. Torvald said, even so. Damask Greydog spoke. Karsa Orlong, listen. This island is being torn apart. We all need your boat. Silgar's a mage. He can open a portal. But not if he's drowning. Understand? He can take us from this realm. Torvald, weaving as the logs shifted under him, his grip on the Teblor's arm tightening, said, Karsa. Karsa looked down at the Daru beside him and asked, you trust Silgar? Torvald said, of course not, but we've no choice. We'd be unlikely to survive plunging through that breach in the dory. We don't even know this wall's height. The drop on the other side could be endless. Karsa, we're armed and they're not. Besides, they're too weak to cause us trouble. You can see that, can't you? Silgar screamed as a large section of the logjam sank away immediately behind him. Scowling, Karsa sheathed his sword. Karsa said, begin untying the boat, Torvald. He waved at the lowlanders and said, come then. But know this, slave master, any sign of treachery from you and your friends will be picking your bones next. Damask, Silgar, and Borug scrambled forward. The entire section of flotsam was pulling away, breaking up along its edges as the current swept it onward. Clearly the breach was expanding, widening to the pressure of an entire sea. Silgar climbed in and crouched down beside the dory's prow. In a rasping voice, Silgar said, I shall open a portal. I can only do so but once. Torvald demanded, then why didn't you leave a long time ago, as he slipped the last line loose and clambered back aboard. Silgar said, there was no path before, out on the sea. But now, here, someone has opened a gate. Close. The fabric is weakened. I've not the skill to do such a thing myself, but I can follow. The dory scraped free of the crumbling island, swung wildly into the sweeping current. Karsa pushed and pulled with the oars to angle their bow into the torrential flow. Torvald repeated, follow? Where? To that, Silgar simply shook his head. Karsa abandoned the oars and made his way to the stern, taking the tiller in both hands.
You're a bit of a coxswain. Why do you think abandoning the oars in lieu of the tiller is a better option here?
Stop it. Stop this nonsense. I spent some time on large vessels, and then I wasn't in any way controlling the ship. So stop it.
Well, you, via proximity, you should have been able to glean something, I would imagine.
I was on a 100-meter long vessel.
That is not an excuse.
Not even the same. They don't have somebody at the tiller in the back. You go up to the main deck up there where they're controlling the ship. It's all computer screens and they got a joystick and everything. It's not like this.
What about the little vessels that you had to get onto the bigger ships?
Those are still pretty modern. They're pretty fast. These crew boats that they have that they put stuff on the back of and everything. The closest thing that I've been on is, I think it was the USS Constitution in the Boston Harbor. That's about the closest experience I have to this type of vessel.
All right.
An old wooden ship.
Since you're not a real sailor, like you portend to be.
No, hold on a second. Hold on a second. That was not my job. I was out there on a vessel controlling equipment for something unrelated to the vessel. Okay?
Listen, you should still know a little something. That being said, no.
The next time you come at me with something like this, why don't you run a little research?
Whoa.
So you're properly informed as to ways to get at me. Maybe the best thing for me to do is just sit here and be quiet, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, maybe that is the cold stare makes somebody backtrack their own self. Anyway, digression aside, why still do you think throwing the oars away?
In this particular case, there's all this stuff around them. You're going to get caught up in it. It could get ripped away. You could hurt yourself. The tiller, at least, I guess, gives you some directional control. Possibly. I mean, it's hard to know how much control they're actually going to have given all this stuff around them, because they're just yet another piece in this mess of logs and wood and trees and whatever else is going on.
That is a good point. I keep forgetting that this is all logs and crap floating around and that it's not just more open water. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think they're lucky to get any open water around them right now. Everything's kind of converging on this breach in the wall.
Okay.
Adequate,
Ensign.
Permission to move on?
Permission to move on, Ensign.
Yes, war leader. They rode the tumbling, churning sea of wreckage towards the breach. Where the wall had given way, there was an ochre cloud of mist as vast and high as the thunderhead. Beyond it, there seemed to be nothing at all. Silgar was making gestures with both hands, snapping them out as would a blind man seeking a door latch. Then he jabbed a finger to the right and shrieked, "There!" Swinging a wild look on Karsa, he repeated, "There! Angelus there!" The place Silgar pointed towards looked no different from anywhere else. Immediately beyond it, the water simply vanished, a wavering line that was the breach itself. Shrugging, Karsa pushed on the tiller. Where they went over mattered little to him. If Silgar failed, they would plunge over, falling whatever distance, to crash amidst a foaming maelstrom that would kill them all. He watched as everyone but Silgar hunkered down, mute with terror. Karsa smiled and bellowed, "Uragal!" half rising as the dory raced for the edge. Darkness swallowed them. And then they were falling. All right, we're going to stop there, and we will finish out the chapter next week, another 5-parter. For standout moments.
Encountering the Tais de Dur and going beast mode, Karsa hasn't lost a step as far as fighting is concerned. 1 versus 16, 20, plus a sorcerer. And he had commented about how capable these Tais de Dur were.
Agreed. I was particularly impressed with his speed, especially after having not practiced with a weapon in such a long time, or even moved this way.
Mm-hmm.
He's just been rowing. He's been contained on this boat, but very impressive recovery and maintenance of the skills that he has.
Yeah. Karsa's emotional roller coaster. He seems a little at odds with how he should be feeling. Maybe he's not fully conscious of all of these things that are going on in his head, but he seems to start having these doubts.
The manifestation of Byroth's curse on him. Good. Yeah. He needs it.
He does. The 7 reappear, and their motives start to become a little bit clear, that they are using Karsa for their own needs, and they don't care about him at all. And that there seem to be a lot more pieces involved, not just these 7 gods alone, but possibly the Tais de Dur and something else.
That is what particularly interests me. There seems to be some whole scheme going on here. It seems like the 7 are working in concert with the Tais de Dur for some other entity or force.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it's coming across right now. Like there's some plan being orchestrated by somebody else, and the 7 and the Tais de Dur are a component of that plan. And Karsa is apparently important to that plan.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious also, the 7 seem to have an understanding that there is a bigger plan at play. I guess we don't know yet. We don't know much about the Tais de Dur, but I wonder if they're aware of the same plan, or if these are just kind of all converging things, each one independent of the other.
On that point, the convergence of storylines, you said converging of things, like the convergence of storylines on the Solanda, that was something I appreciated as well.
Yeah.
Bringing it back. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
To go back to the scene that left such a strong impression on me with the Solanda, with the heads on the deck and everything, and then seeing it was Torvald that actually collected them and put the tarp over them, and then Karsa actually went into the captain's cabin and killed that mage that's in there, and why there's no magic. That was a good catch from your part with the Odotarl dust. Yeah, all of that stuff. Love going back to that. You know, I love Deadhouse Gates. So just that little brief going back to Deadhouse Gates was great.
Well, the Nascent in general seems to be kind of like a crossroads for a lot of the different books. I don't believe that this is the last time we're going to be coming to this realm. It's very fun. Every time you come back, another little something is deposited to fill that overall picture of what's happening. And so, I don't know, I guess that's why this particular place, the Nascent, it's a special place. Every time we reread, you find out a little bit more.
Yeah, the wall being there and then taking us back to the prologue, that was another connection. We do know that Troll was chained to the wall at the Nascent. So interested to see when that was, because we had no direct connection because it was on whatever day of the search. We don't know what timeline that's tied to. So we'll see. Hopefully there's some more information there.
Yeah.
It was good to get confirmation that the 7 are Talani Mass.
Yeah.
And they are not, in fact, gods. So the Teblor have been co-opted by these individuals.
Yeah. That's a good little tidbit, too, because I guess it was unclear. Maybe we got the impression that they weren't real, but it was never fully spelled out for us. And also, like you said, I wasn't sure if they were Talani Mass. I guess we had an inkling, but never confirmed. Silgar and his men are still alive. Let's see what this little slime ball is going to do now.
Curious to see how that plays out, because Karsa, he's got to talk to Silgar about some stuff.
Yeah.
And then we got the Baba Yaga in there too.
Yeah. And also
Damask Gray Mask.
Damask. How fortuitous that there's also a little portal, like a way out, that it's still remaining, and they were able to slip out into wherever. We'll find out next week.
Makes you wonder who made the portal, how long ago it was there.
True. Excellent point.
Great job today, Dane.
Good job, Kamraun.
Do you have any final thoughts?
We've touched on this already. This is a lot of fun to be able to reread this and start to tie some of these things together, pick out little pieces that we missed from 2 books ago. It's really enjoyable when we start to see these little connections appear.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you. That is some of the most fun of rereading the books, going back and then seeing things backwards, but also forwards, because you and I are seeing things that are being planted now for stuff that's to come. So pretty cool.
Also, if I may add, to get somebody else's perspective when you're reading through this is also a lot of fun. Your point of view on things is maybe a little bit different than mine, possibly vice versa. That's enjoyable, because a lot of times when you're just reading through it on your own, you see it one way, and getting somebody else's view is a lot of fun on this.
When you meet somebody that reads the Malazan books, you're always kind of like, wasn't it cool when this happened? Wasn't it cool when that happened? Well, so much cool stuff happens. You almost have to go through the books in this manner with somebody, like a book club type thing, to really experience all those things together. That's what I really appreciate about it, because generally those conversations center on just the big stuff.
Yeah.
And so now there's a lot of other stuff that may not be brought up in those moments that you get to dig into.
Yeah. Well, as I've said many times, when I was reading through this, you were not reading through at the same spot that I was. And I'd ask you about something, and it was, like you said, it was the big standout things.
And I let you down.
Well, I wouldn't say that. But it was, like you said, it's hard to remember all the minutia that's going on. But like this, we get to dig in a little bit.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.
Torvald said, you needn't worry about the ores. You needn't Torvald said, you needn't
The arsonist had oddly shaped feet.
Loose lips sink ships. Loose lips sinks ships. Torvald said, you needn't worry about the oarsmen.
Jesus Christ. You needn't.
That was a hard sentence for some reason.